Greetings, this video is for both new users and previous users of my Excel-Checkbook spreadsheet for Microsoft Excel. It will be a complete walkthrough of the features along with how to use it. While this will be long, don't worry, you can watch only the parts of interest. There are video chapter links in the YouTube description below, which will jump to different features in the Excel-Checkbook for a tutorial. New for 2026, there's now a convenient search box at the top of each register for searching transactions by description. There's also a table to record your assets and current values so that a net worth calculation can be displayed. There's a subscription tracker table to list the various music, movie, news, and any other monthly subscriptions which often can get away from you. There's a new set-aside money register to help budget for future significant expenses. There's also an enhanced worksheet called Debt Obligations for tracking loans, your mortgage, or any other debt you have, along with new functionalities to show how a change in your monthly payment will alter the eventual payoff for that debt. And lastly, monthly bank statement reconciliation has been enhanced with a few tweaks to both the register screen as well as the reconcile worksheet. Before we dive into the features, I want to say that Microsoft Excel is one of the best software programs ever written for the personal computer. I began my career in IT in the 1980s, a few years before Microsoft Excel became available, back when Lotus 1-2-3 was the king of spreadsheet programs. That program was a major reason the personal computers became so successful. While it can be difficult to learn all of the ins and outs of this great program called Excel, I think it's worth your time as it can be helpful in so many other areas beyond just financial management. Okay, enough about that. Let's dive in. We'll start with an overview of one of the registers. There are 12 register worksheets available to you for use with checking accounts, savings accounts, active credit card accounts, and you'll find those throughout the tabs at the bottom of the spreadsheet. As the spreadsheet has so many worksheets, there's a convenient button called List Sheets, which will bring up a pop-up window so you can quickly switch to any worksheet. The register worksheets will feature columns for date, transaction type, check number, payee description, withdrawal, deposit, the balance is calculated automatically. There's a column for reconciliation to checkmark each entry when comparing against your monthly bank statement, and then a subcategory column for specifying or categorizing each of your transactions. And when you choose a subcategory, it automatically populates the category and type column. Lastly, there's a memo column for any additional notes you want to make for any transaction. Along the top, we have a reminder of the last check number found within that particular register, along with the current register's name. And as you go to use the checkbook, you'll likely want to give each register a meaningful name. So for example, if I right-click on Register 1, I can choose Rename and give this a meaningful name. Some of the other features that we'll look at later on in the video include the ability to easily do a transfer to and from an account. It just automates the entry of a withdrawal from one account and then doing a deposit to another account, for example, a checking to savings transaction. There's a button for splitting a transaction across multiple categories. Another button for quickly posting recurring future transactions into your register. A button to visit the settings worksheet where you can edit your categories and subcategories. A button for setting money aside for a significant future expense that you might have, as well as a button to just quickly jump to the bottom of your current worksheet. Also featured on the screen are numbers for today's balance versus future balance. And where that can come into play is that if your register has a transaction that is dated in the future, for example, if I were to put in February 15th for a particular expense, and maybe that's a larger expense of $350, you'll notice that the future balance is now different from today's balance. Next, we'll look at the typical data entry of inserting or adding transactions into a register spreadsheet. The date column does have a drop-down picker to automate the easy entry of a particular date, so we can pick that from the drop-down picker. The transaction type also features a drop-down picker, totally optional, not required, only if you would like to designate that the particular transaction was from the ATM, from point of sale, a fee, etc. When appropriate, you can enter the check number, and then we come to the column for the payee description. So for example, if I were to have visited the grocery store, I can key that in and then put in the dollar amount of my purchase. Now, in the case of this particular entry, you might have noticed that it automatically populated the subcategory of groceries, and this is another drop-down list fully customizable by you. And after making any particular choice from subcategory, that will automatically populate the broader category column and type column, both of which are used in the dashboard and reports area for helpful income versus expense reporting. Now, as you go to do entries into here, of course, you do not have to use the drop-down pickers. For example, I can type in 1/15 and then use my right arrow key to go over. And let's say that I had an entry for my mortgage. I'll type that in, key in my dollar amount. Notice that the balance is automatically computing, but it does not show until you have put something into the description column. This is just for aesthetic reasons. And in the case of that particular entry, I would want to designate the subcategory, and I will find that down here in the list. Related to choices for subcategory and category, it's helpful to look at the list of categories which are fully customizable by you. There's a button here for going to the settings worksheet, button here called Edit Categories. And when you click that, you will arrive at the settings worksheet where you'll see the provided list of categories. I do recommend before doing extensive entry of transactions, you will want to review the current list of categories, make changes to it as would best fit your needs. Also, as we shift over here to the right, if you happen to be a previous user of the Quicken software program, there is a link here to the list of common Quicken subcategories and categories that you may find that you'd like to use in place of the provided ones. Now, in the case of working with the categories list, it can be helpful to keep this list alphabetized. You also have Excel's buttons here for inserting and deleting. Those will work just fine. So, for example, if my cursor is here on the row for coffee, I can use the insert button. It will insert a blank row above that if I just wanted to easily get my entries in alphabetical order. That is not a requirement, of course. And after making any extensive changes to the categories list, do know that you can easily sort this list alphabetically. You can do so via the right-click menu in Excel. You'll find the sort choice here for sorting A to Z. There's also Excel's ribbon bar featuring the choice to sort A to Z. That can be quite helpful. While we're here on the settings worksheet, quick mention about the frequently used payees list. You might have noticed that during entries, there is a drop down here for the payee description. And so you can customize that list there for quicker data entry. We'll go back to the settings worksheet where you can edit and change the frequently used payees as desired. For any entry that you add here, you can designate a default subcategory so that after entering a Walmart transaction, for example, it will default to household items, which of course you can override within the register as needed. Now, while we're here on the settings worksheet, I do want to make mention that if you use a register for an active credit card, for example, I have a register here called the Discover card, I do recommend that you change the setting here to be a liability instead of an asset, as that will then just help confirm that that is a debt obligation that you have, and then the net worth calculation that you'll see on this screen as well as another screen will be correct. All right, we'll return to the checking account. I do want to make mention that you certainly might end up having transactions that are out of date order, which is harmless. It's okay. At any time, though, you can use the button here to keep them sorted in oldest to newest order. It's also safe to do some initial data entry, and then at a later date, maybe you want to add the previous year's transactions, and absolutely you can do that. And in that regard, if you decide to add older transactions, I think you'll find it easiest to just go ahead and add those oldest transactions at the bottom of the register. And after doing so, you'd be ready to then just resort your list. However, one very important caveat is to always make sure that this very first row, which is a special row, has the oldest date in the register. So for example, if I were to add all of my transactions for the years 2025, 2024, and maybe even all the way back to 2023, I would want to make sure that this date of the very first row is truly the oldest within the register. so that I can safely sort on the date column. Also, this very first row has the starting balance that goes with that particular date that you're using. And that cell, called the G8 cell, is different from all these other cells where there is a complex formula to calculate the balance. All right, I'm going to make use of this button here to jump to the bottom and talk about how you could, if desired, insert a new transaction in between or delete existing transactions. Start off with a delete. Let's say that I wanted to delete this entry. It maybe was invalid, a duplicate. You can make use of Excel's delete button here, and that will just delete that whole row out of the table. I'm also going to make use of Excel's undo feature to bring that particular entry back. Next, for any reason, if you would like to insert a blank row, you also have the Excel button here for inserting a row, and then that will shift the other entries down, so you can go ahead and put in a new entry in between two dates. Now, related to getting older transactions into the checkbook, I do want to mention that on my website, there is an entry here for how to import bank transactions. And there are articles here for a variety of banking institutions. If your particular bank is not listed, feel free to reach out to me. You can also take a look at any of the particular entries that are here and see if the provided CSV file that you get from your bank is a close match to the ones that are provided here. Now, all of these registers have the register worksheet formatted as a table, which does provide some advantages. For example, you'll notice that there are small little drop-down arrows for each column heading. Where that is particularly useful or handy is when you maybe want to just see all of the entries that are a particular subcategory or category. For example, if I click this drop down here for subcategory, maybe I'm curious to see just all of the dining out entries. So what I can do is deselect all, choose dining out, click OK, and now I see all of the entries that have been categorized as dining out. You'll also notice that at the top it's showing a sum of the filtered expenses. We have made use of Excel's filtering feature to filter out only the rows matching the criteria that I have. And anytime that filtering has been activated in a particular worksheet, you'll see a little icon that represents a filter. You also notice that rows are in the color blue. You'll see that row numbers are skipping. And so it is important to know how to clear out that filter so you're back to seeing all the transactions. One option would be to go back to that particular drop-down menu and then click on the choice for clear filter from category. Now, while we're talking about filtering, we'll take a quick look at this new feature of searching descriptions. So you can click your mouse up there, type in a particular payee description, and then press the enter key. And what it'll do is a filter on that particular column, the payee description column. So now I see all of the entries that I did for Kroger. And then there's a convenient button here to clear so that you're back to seeing all of the entries in the worksheet. Next, we'll take a look at the feature called Transfer to from Account. The idea behind this feature is just to automate the entry of a withdrawal from one register and then a corresponding deposit to the other. So we'll go ahead and click on this button here for Transfer to and from Account, and we'll arrive to a screen where we can enter in one or more transfers between registers. So I have an example already here on the screen dated February 1st, where I've put in the description of an entry that's going to go to savings. I put in my dollar amount. This is a drop down to indicate which register this withdrawal will be coming from, and then which register it will be depositing to. An optional subcategory. This will be our complete list of subcategories, not necessarily required for a transfer, but you can specify that. And then lastly, a field for an optional memo. Now you could put in multiple transfer entries, and then when you're ready, we can click the green button here to go ahead and add these entries, which I'll go ahead and do. So we're now returned back to the checking account where we see this new entry has been added, February 1st to savings, $400. And if I go visit the savings register, I'll see the corresponding entry over here showing as a deposit. Now, quick note, this is not actually going to your bank accounts and making this transaction happen. This is just to help you automate the data entry for a withdrawal and deposit that you actually do within your bank account. Okay, we'll go back to the checking account. Next, we'll take a look at the split a transaction feature. So the split a transaction feature is handy when you have a large transaction and it spills across multiple categories. So for example, maybe this entry here for Costco is one that involves multiple categories, not just household items. Now, quick note, if your cursor happens to be on a blank row, and if you click that button, you will get a note to say that that transaction, that blank row, doesn't have anything to split. So we do want to be on the appropriate row when we go to click on that button to split a transaction. Okay, so you'll arrive at this screen where you can designate your different subcategories and amounts. So for example, perhaps part of this purchase at Costco was for some clothing, and we'll put in the dollar amount spent on clothes. Perhaps another part was spent on groceries, so we'll designate groceries as the next subcategory and the dollar amount that was spent on groceries. Perhaps another categorization was related to some wine that was purchased. And you do have the optional cell here for memo, for optional note. We'll put in the amount there spent on wine. Now I still have a remainder left here of $30.52. So this feature will not let you add these entries until you have completed all the remainder. So for example, if I were to click on that green button, I do get the note that the remainder is not yet 0. So I'll go ahead and finish off. Perhaps coffee is getting expensive, so we'll designate that as the remainder and put in that dollar amount. And now I have a remainder of 0, and I can go ahead and click the button to add those entries. Now the end result will be that you'll be automatically returned to whatever register you started that process from. The previous or the original transaction will have the description altered to show what its original split amount was. And then we have our 4 rows here that are splitting out that transaction with their dollar amounts and their subcategories. And I do want to mention that you do have some customization around this. So for example, if I go back to that split a transaction screen, I want to mention that you can customize the text that is appended to the original or main transaction. Default is split of, and also the original transaction will have a subcategory of -- split added to it. Also of note, when you go to do a monthly bank reconciliation, of course, your bank statement will just have the entry for Costco, in this example, $231.85. And so, if you make use of the checkmark feature that we'll cover here a little bit later, you would need to, checkmark all of those individual split entries that will total up to the $231.85. The future transaction feature is helpful when you have common recurring transactions that you want to quickly add to any of your registers. So we'll go ahead and click the button here for future transactions and arrive at this screen. Full instructions are provided on the screen, but let's walk through how this works. I have some sample entries here that'll just give you an idea that, for example, maybe some of your recurring transactions would be a paycheck, entry for paying the cable TV bill, cell phones, car insurance. You get the idea. Typically, recurring transactions happen usually the same day of the month. For example, maybe it's the first day of the month, the 5th day of the month, the middle of the month, etc. Now, I'm recording this video in the month of January, so if I were to click the button to post these entries, it would assume that these should be going into the month of January with these particular days of the month. However, you can specify an exact date for any line that you'd like to. Now, you might notice that some of these have been given different group letters. So there's group A, group B, C, and D, etc. And the idea here is that when you go to click this green button to post those entries, the program will ask, well, which group would you like to post? The idea is that you can have maybe particular entries that you'd like to post earlier in the month versus different entries that you'd post later in the month. So this is just giving you the flexibility to group those. And now just to demonstrate the feature, I'll go ahead and click on that green button and we'll see this pop-up screen, and I'll tell it that I would like to post the group B entry. So there'll be 3 of those. You might notice that there's a reference for skipping rows. We'll see that in effect here in a moment. All right, so now that it's completed, we're going to go back to the checking account, and we'll see that there have been several blank rows skipped before it did put in that paycheck dollar amount. Now, why would you want to skip some rows when using this feature? Totally optional. The idea is that since these are likely future entries, maybe you just like to have blank rows ready for the ongoing transactions that you'll have in the register before those future entries are there. And of course, you can always use the Excel button here for inserting additional rows as needed, or even deleting blank rows as desired. So it's just there if you'd like to make use of having blank rows added before these recurring transactions are posted. The Assets worksheet is a place to list simple assets that you own. For example, you might list vehicles, your home, retirement accounts, annuities, etc. The date column is to designate the last time that you updated the corresponding value for that particular asset. At the bottom of the worksheet, you'll see the grand total of your assets, and then the worksheet also totals up all of your bank register assets, for example, checking accounts, savings accounts, along with any liabilities from registers. That would be registers that you've designated as an active credit card, for example. And lastly, there's a row for debt obligations that we'll look at next, and then we're finally able to arrive at your current net worth. From here, we'll jump over to the debt obligation worksheet. We'll make use of the button to jump to a different sheet. The debt obligations worksheet is a place to list inactive credit cards or other personal loans, vehicle loans, even your mortgage. By entering these different debt obligations, the spreadsheet will be able to calculate your net worth. In the examples listed here, I have entries for a credit card with Wells Fargo, Discover credit card, Citibank, car loan, etc. Now, I do want to make mention that you would typically only list inactive credit cards if you have a register devoted to a specific credit card, for example, a Discover card. Then you would not want to list that in this debt obligation worksheet, as it would really be a duplicate. For any entries that you've added here, they will be charted to the chart that's shown on the right. Also, you can make use of the Excel feature for zooming in and zooming out. For example, if I click that minus button there, it does zoom out a bit so that I can see more of the chart while I'm actually working on the worksheet. We'll zoom back in now. The other feature that may be of use to you is to experiment with your current payments to a particular credit card, vehicle loan, etc. For example, I have an entry here for a car loan where the current balance as of the date that I designated is a little over $23,000. The initial loan amount was nearly $37,000. Current car payment is $350, showing that the payoff month would be December 2032. And if I made an adjustment, for example, let's say that I raised my current payment to $400, I see that I'm now going to pay it off nearly a year early. Now, if for some reason you want to list a particular debt obligation but do not want it to be considered in the net worth calculation, you can change that designation to be no instead of yes. A new feature for 2026 that can be helpful for budgeting or forecasting is the Set Money Aside feature. So from any register, you'll see a button there for Set Money Aside. When we click that button, we'll arrive at a screen for entering in a new set aside entry. I have a sample entry on here dated April 15th, estimated federal tax payment. Perhaps I know that I'll have to make that estimated amount in April, so you can designate which checking account you'll likely be withdrawing those funds from, the purpose here, and this purpose list is something that you can customize. It's different from the subcategory field. And if needed, there's a button here to go edit that purpose list so you can make customizations to that drop-down. For example, if I click on that button, I'll arrive at the settings worksheet where I have this current drop-down list. Again, you can just add, delete, edit any of these entries, and when you're ready, go back to the Add a Set-Aside Worksheet screen. So when I click the green button, we'll have an entry added to the register specified under Withdraw From, but also there'll be an entry added into a new special register that we'll take a look at next. So I'll go ahead and click on the green button. And if I go visit the original register for checking account, I'll see an entry has been added with that future date in April with my description and dollar amount. Next, I have the special register called Set Aside Funds, which will be totaling up all of the entries that I'm forecasting or budgeting for. And again, this is called the Set Aside Funds Register. And I have some sample entries in here for vacation and property taxes, estimated federal taxes, etc. And again, it's just a simple, easy way to do some budgeting, forecasting, something that's similar to an envelope saving system. The subscription worksheet is a simple list to help you track your streaming music, video services, newspaper, magazine subscriptions, etc. You'll see sample entries in the downloaded file just to give you an idea of how you might make use of this. You can list the different subscription names, designate a type if you'd like to, start date, which is totally optional. And then if you put in your monthly cost, it will automatically calculate the annual cost. In the instance where you've got a subscription that you pay once a year, just go ahead and enter in that as an annual cost. For myself personally, I like to list which credit card I used for the subscription just to help keep track of things. If you do put in a date for a canceled date, it will automatically not then compute the annual cost so that the grand total at the bottom will be an accurate reflection of your current subscription services. The dashboard provides a visual representation of your income and expenses, and there are buttons called slicer buttons that will filter based on your choice. We see charts for total withdrawal and deposits and withdrawals by month. If we scroll down, we'll also see a breakdown of your income sources, then a top 15 expenses by subcategory, followed by top 5 expenses by category. When you go to interact with the dashboard and or reports, and you make use of the filtering buttons, you can do things, for example, like compare your expenses for the month of November versus the month of October, etc. So as you click on these different buttons, it will filter to just those particular transactions that fall under that particular month. You have a button here to clear your filter selection so you're back to seeing all 12 months or whatever months you have entries for in your registers. In a similar way, you can view just particular years. So if you have multiple years worth of transactions in the spreadsheet, you will see buttons for each year that you have. Also, if you just wanted to focus on a specific register, for example, maybe just a register that you would have called main checking, you can click on that, and now you only see the income and expenses that are pulling from that particular register. Once again, you've got a button there to clear filters, so you're back to seeing all entries. Now, there may be an occasion when you want to see a couple different things. Let's say, for example, I'm interested in seeing my expenses for food and drink, but I'd also like to see that in combination with living expenses. But when I click that, I'm switching between those two. So there's a button here to do a multi-select. So that once I activate that, I can now click on a second or even a third item and see what those expenses are. And then when you're done, you can either go back to the clear filter and or turn off the multi-select. The report screen has similar functionality with those slicer buttons. However, this time we have a detailed text report. The report has a breakdown of my income categorizations as well as my expense categorizations. There's a drop down here to designate which year I would like to focus on. For example, if I only want to see 2025, I can choose that option versus seeing 2026 as an option. Going back to all, I also have the ability to filter on specific categories and or subcategories. For example, if I click on living expenses, I'm now only seeing the expenses that are designated as living expenses, and then I have the button there to clear out that filter. Now, all of this is using Excel's pivot table functionality, and you can do quite a bit of customization on the look and feel of this. So if you click your cursor in any of these cells of this particular table, the menu choice for Pivot Table Analyze and Design will become available to you. Under the Design heading, you can choose different colors to change for the table. You can also decide whether or not you'd like to see blank rows added to add some further spacing. That's an option that you can do. The report layout is something you can also toggle. Currently it's in the compact form. You can also switch it to the outline form, the tabular form, etc. So you do have control over the look and feel of all of this. Another thing that can be handy is under the Pivot Table Analyze, there's a button here for the field list. And when you activate that, you'll have a side panel that will appear. And currently we have rows appearing for the year, type, category, and subcategory. And you might decide that actually you don't care about seeing the subcategory in this table. So you can actually uncheck the subcategory, and now you're just seeing the broader category layouts for this. Now, if I click to re-add the subcategory, normally it should know to put it back at the bottom. Do know, though, that you can drag these particular fields to be in a specific position as desired. Something else that could be interesting or helpful. Let's say that I wanted to see a report and I'm very interested in a particular payee description. As an example, I can hold down my mouse, drag that payee description down here to the filter box area. And now I have a new drop down available to me here. And if I click on that, and I could perhaps put in Costco or Kroger or the grocery store, I'll just put in Kroger, click OK. And now I'm seeing a breakdown of my expenses related to Kroger across the different months. And if I click here, I can go back to seeing all entries. So that's some of the handy power of Excel pivot tables. I'll click the X button to close that side screen. Monthly bank statement reconciliation is another feature within the checkbook. For any of the register worksheets that you have, you'll find a button here at the top for reconcile. When you click that button, it's a toggle on and off. So if I click it again, you'll see that collapse. But activating this reconciliation feature will expose these extra lines that will help you as you are doing a monthly bank statement reconcile. Now, as part of this process, you typically would get your bank statement from your bank for a particular month. And in my current example, I have a statement date for the month of September. There's a hyperlink right here for reconcile settings that'll take you to this worksheet called reconcile. The idea is that once you've gotten your bank statement would have a particular start date and end date, and you would put those two date values in. The spreadsheet then quickly looks at all of the entries in that particular register to find how many checks are there, the total withdrawals found, and the total deposits found. Now, after looking at your bank statement, if the bank statement lists these same dollar amounts for checks found, withdrawals found, deposits found, you're probably fine. You could probably stop at that point with your reconciliation. However, if you would like to do a reconciliation and or perhaps maybe you have a discrepancy. As an example, let's say that your statement indicates that the amount of checks that were withdrawn was $319.28. The total withdrawals is $335.60.08, and then your deposits totaled $2,275. So if you key those amounts in from your statement, you might notice that there's a discrepancy between your statement versus what is being found in your checkbook. So in this instance, we would certainly want to go to that particular register and start to do a review. So with the reconciliation mode turned on so that we have these extra rows, we can start to review each transaction and compare it to what's on the statement. And as I check off these different amounts, you'll notice that the dollar amounts designated for not cleared will change. And often what can happen is that as you are reviewing all of these different entries, there's one that you skip over because it's not quite a match, but you continue on reviewing your different entries. And you realize that you had misentered a particular one, and looking at the bank statement, it was actually $45.21. So you make that correction, and now when you go back to the reconcile screen, you see that your totals are now matching. Now this extra column is here just to help because it's quite common that you have a check that might not have cleared yet. You've got it in your register, but it has not yet cleared with the bank. All right, so I just now paused the video to add a common scenario of a check that is not yet cleared. So for my bank statement says that there were $319 worth of checks, but within the register, I've actually got $519 worth of checks that were found. So if I go back to my check register, I might review and realize, oh yes, there was a check in the amount of $200 that is not yet cleared. So I certainly don't want to check it off. But since it has not yet cleared the bank, what I would recommend is that I just change the date to be outside of my statement period. So if my statement period ends September 30, then I'll change this date to say maybe October 1, 2025. After doing so, when I go back to the reconcile screen, all is well. Now, reconciliation can be one of those quite frustrating exercises that you do. So there are some additional instructions here on the screen, as well as a link to an article that has some common issues that people often encounter when it comes to reconciliations. Lastly, I do want to make mention of the website's resources. Under the menu choice for support and resources, there are different videos, training resources, frequently asked questions. My strong recommendation for using a file sync cloud storage service, for example, Dropbox, Apple Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, for storing your spreadsheet to protect yourself from accidental file loss. So thank you for watching. I hope that was helpful, and I hope you excel at your finances.